to Everyday Theology, where we don't tell you what to believe or how to think, but discuss why people believe what they do and why it matters.
On this journey, we will speak with artists, curators, influencers, and pastors.
I'm Aaron Ross.
And I'm Ben Gomez. Awesome. Today we have one of my good friends, Brad Lomenick, with us on the podcast. I'm excited just because when I was personally going through some transition in my own life back in 2015, he wrote a book called H3 Leadership that was phenomenal, that really gave me perspective as to what God was doing in my life. And so today we get to hear and glean from his wisdom. So Brad, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and we're excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Professor Ben. Are you doctor, by the way?
Ooh.
I do have a doctorate.
Dr. Ben, excuse me, Dr. Gomez.
He's going to be double doctor in a couple of years.
What does that mean? If you're a double doctor, you get to put like that twice on your.
I hope he does.
I don't know.
On
Maybe
your name?
Increase in pay? No, I'm just kidding.
There we go. Come on. Hey, it's good to be here with you guys, and thanks for letting me share a few thoughts. So if you cut me open, I bleed Jesus and I bleed leadership. That's sort of my two things I'm probably most passionate about. So worked for John Maxwell for a bunch of years, was part of starting Catalyst, led that for a decade plus. And then the last few years, I've been hanging out in smaller environments, but not necessarily less influential, just smaller, curated, under the radar. I sort of went from the spotlight to the shadows in terms of where I'm spending my time the last 4 or 5 years, and written a couple of books, H3 Leadership being one of those, and Catalyst Leader was the first one.
So, Brad, let's talk a little bit about kind of like your transition from Catalyst into what you said, the stage to the shadows, and what kind of led you there as we set up the rest of our talk.
Sure. Well, all of us as leaders at some point are going to go through transitions of vocation. And for me, that was a big one, the transition from leading Catalyst, which had become over a decade plus, had become a movement. I mean, I don't like to say that we were a movement because movements are God-breathed, but I think we were based on just sort of, looking back at it. But I was turning 40. There was this sense that we had started Catalyst for young leaders, and all of us were in our 20s when we started it. And now I was that guy that was 40 that we sort of not made fun of, but we said, this is not for you. And,
wow.
When you get to that point, when you're sort of at the pinnacle of your vocational career or you're leading something, and then you look at it and go, I'm not the target anymore. You got to ask some questions of, is this the right seat for me to sit in on the bus? And so there was a bunch of things that happened. My leadership had gotten a little stale in terms of the way I was leading. When you carry the weight of something, it always starts to crush you, and you get spit out usually towards your default, which is not necessarily always healthy. So all those things were swirling in the hot tub at that point in terms of transition. And so I had a guy that was in my life that he spoke some prophetic truth into me, and he just said, I think you're done. I think you need to transition to a new season, not because you can't continue to lead this movement, but because there's certain things that only you can do that you need to be working on. And so that was it. I mean, it was, and at the end of the day, like, it felt like a big deal, but really nobody cared. I mean, we all think, oh my gosh, personally, I thought, well, what's going to happen? And the reality was the majority of leaders who were connected to Catalyst were like, that's good. That's great. Like, thanks for transitioning, but it doesn't really bother us. And sometimes we think as the leader that this is going to be some massive thing, when in reality, the people who are your customers just look at it as something normal.
Well, why do you think, in kind of that story there, why do you think so many leaders, especially since so well connected, quite a few people and leaders, why do you think so many leaders are afraid to take that step of going, okay, maybe my time in this place is done and I need to open up the door for someone actually else to lead it completely and kind of step away?
Well, a lot of times it's fear. It's fear of the unknown, but it's also fear that I'm now going to get put out to pasture. Like I've reached my pinnacle
Yeah.
And therefore the next season is going to be, I'm on the JV team, I'm on the B team, or, I moved from the NFL to the mini league and
Indoor arena.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or I was playing in the Premier League in soccer, and now I'm like 8th division in England where nobody shows up to the game. So I think that's a lot of it, is that there's, for many of us, and this isn't always that because you're at the top of the organization either. This happens if you're a student pastor. This happens if you're an intern. This happens if you're the high school quarterback. This happens when you're a middle manager. So we always think succession or transition is most important when you're leading at the top of the food chain, but it has to be healthy at every level. Because think of the high school, again, going back to the high school quarterback, the guy who was a big deal in high school, all-stater.
Yeah.
And now he's 23 and he's coming back still wearing his leather jacket, showing up at football practice.
Yeah.
And you're looking at this guy going, bro, first of all, you're creeping us out a little bit.
Adam Sandler movie?
Exactly. But they're, they still want to be in the glory days. They want to still have that sense that they're the hero on campus.
Yeah.
And this is, we got to move on. Like we have to, and transitions, nothing is wrong with transitions.
Yeah.
In fact, they're healthy. But sometimes, again, because we now got to the top of the mountain that we thought was our mountain, now we naturally end up like keeping people from also joining us at the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Compared to, hey, like the view is great up here. Why don't you come up and look at this, and I'll step back down and go climb another mountain.
Yeah.
Now, if I can pivot for a second, I know a lot of the work you've been doing lately has been with young leaders, right?
Yeah.
And I say mid leaders.
Younger. You can call some of us younger. We're not young,
leaders,
we're just younger.
Wiser leaders.
Yeah.
And it's helping them be healthy. Now, my understanding is that Maura, let me get her name right here. She's a clinical psychologist.
Ben's putting his password into his iPad.
Definitely.
I know. I'm watching. I'm trying to. Yeah.
Maura Aarons Mele, she's a clinical psychologist. She talks about the anxious achiever.
Yeah.
Right. This smooth, extroverted social interaction that people have, but then they're introverts off the stage. And there's this cultural pressure to perform at a high level. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I have had many personal, private conversations about burnout, about the feeling of I have to perform, I have to do this, I have to keep up with the Joneses. Our attendance has to be up in our organization. We have to have the products that people like. We want to keep people. And so when we talk about that with leaders, what's one way that we can help leaders be whole? Right? Be whole, like be good off the stage, on the stage, in meetings, in private, in public life. And I know you've done a lot of work with this. We climbed a mountain together. I know you're going to share that story.
Oh, I'm going to.
I know you are. Where I was struggling, I get it. It was pre-triathlon days.
You're looking better today, though.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now that we're 18 months removed from our mountain experience.
Yes.
Well, let me give just one thought on that, because this is a big deal. I mean, all of us are trying to navigate the downsides of the weight of leadership. It's true for every single one of us.
Yeah.
Like we're navigating the weight, and what weight is turning into these days is anxiety, it's depression, it's frustration, it's tendency towards thoughts we shouldn't be having. So I think a lot of it goes back to self-awareness. I mean, at the end of the day, like if you're a leader who's not truly dialed in on being self-aware and being authentic, and authentic is the buzzword, but it's self-awareness. It's knowing yourself, the way you're wired. So if you are if you're an achiever, like I'm an Enneagram 3, I'm an ENTJ, I'm a high D and high I on the Myers.
ENTJ, let's go.
On the DISC finder.
Wait, are we all 3 ENTJs?
Wow.
Oh, you are too?
Yeah, and I'm also a 3 on the Enneagram. So
no, I'm a 1 and equally an 8.
Yes. But we, like when we talk this language, first of all, we all know now, between the three of us, we know the way we're wired.
Yeah.
So I know what my downsides are. When I'm unhealthy, I know the direction I head. When I'm healthy, I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I also give permission then, when I'm more self-aware, I give permission to people around me to actually help me lead them better.
Yeah.
And, if we're not willing to be self-aware, then we're navigating so many of the things that that we think are sin many times, that are actually that's just the way God's wired us. And we've got to be like ruthlessly dedicated to self-awareness. And for me, this has been, it's the idea that I'm constantly trying to discover my places of contentment, because the more content I am, the more confident I become.
Yeah.
Like humility is not, I don't think humility is actually, or let me say it this way. I don't think arrogance is the opposite of humility. I think insecurity is.
Yeah.
And out of insecurity comes arrogance. Out of insecurity comes, I'm trying too hard. I'm faking it. I am the anxious overachiever. So the more humble you are, the more self-aware you are, which means the more content you are, which means the more confident you are.
So your quote on page 27.
Oh gosh, you're going to like specific quotes.
Yes.
Like I'm supposed to remember this from 4 years ago.
I'm going to give
Right.
you the quote because I have it here in my notes. Meekness is not weakness.
Yeah.
It's power under control. It's ambition grounded with humility and lived out in confidence, not arrogance.
There it is. Yeah, that's
Right?
it.
I think.
And we think meekness, we think of the Sermon on the Mount, and that meekness, many of us would translate that as weakness, or it's, oh, you just run over me. I'll sit back. I'll let you go ahead. Meekness is the picture of beautiful power. It's like the racehorse that's appropriately bridled, compared to the racehorse who is not appropriately bridled, and it now either it's just frustrated and it bucks you off, or it runs away with you.
Yeah.
And Brad knows about this because when we were in Colorado, he took a
can I
bunch
tell
of
the
us
story now?
Okay, go ahead.
So Lost Valley Ranch, this incredible place in Colorado where a bunch of us young bucks went and go every year. And Ben was there a couple years ago. We ride horses, which, I do have some experience in.
Which I'm a city slicker.
wrangling.
Like I did not grow up riding horses. I grew up in New York City and
I just
Boston.
wish I could have seen that.
I have
More
a
than
video. I
anything-
can show you after
Okay,
the
He's got
podcast.
video.
I need to see it.
Yeah.
And you felt, how did you feel when you were on the back of the horse?
I felt great because we had lessons and
Right.
you told us what to do. And
yeah.
you gave us perfect instruction.
And we
And
just-
I had the right attire, unlike the hike.
So the hike, the horseback riding went well, but the hike, and this was like it was a test of will.
Yes.
So there's probably 15 of us, and
Yes.
and Ben we sort of drug you along.
Yes, you did.
You weren't really interested in the hike,
No.
but you went along
I
because
wanted to read. I wanted to play video games.
But you also went along just because you were interested in the conversation
Correct.
and the community. Like,
Yes.
we had some good dudes that were climbing this hike. So we get maybe, about a quarter of the way up, you're starting to drag a little
Yeah.
bit behind.
Yeah.
And
The air shifted on me.
Well, the air gets thinner the higher you go up.
It shifted on me.
Leadership
from
lesson
Florida.
number one. There's less oxygen when you're at the top of the mountain.
You've just never experienced not Florida humidity air.
But you got
Correct.
to a certain point.
Where I was like,
You said, I'm done. I'm going back.
Yeah, there was a point where we had to literally climb this cliff.
We had to
And I'm
use our hands, and
I'm like, what is this? This ain't the hike I grew up going on. Like, if we go to Massachusetts, I can take you to some nice trails,
Right.
some nice roads.
Right.
I'm like, we have to do what?
No, it was a little more intense than probably.
And that was a lot healthier back then.
Well, you get to this point, and you basically look at all of us and say, I'm going back.
Or
And-
you can leave me right here.
Yeah, or I'll
and when
stay
you
and
turn
wait.
around-
I'll wait on you guys to get. And I don't know if these are the right words, but I basically said, no, you're going to the top with us.
Yes, very nicely said. Yes.
And we will slow down and we will wait on you as long as we need to. But you're going to go to the top of the mountain with us. And so, begrudgingly, you
Yes.
sort of went along.
Yes.
And then
Peer pressure is real.
once we got up there, then obviously the view was incredible.
Right.
But here's the lesson I think from that. There was many lessons, but don't let people who are in your circle not go to the top of the mountain with you.
Right.
If you're leading them or you're part of the team, part of our job as leaders is to take people with us, because you wouldn't have gotten there
No.
without our encouragement, without our forcing you in many ways. You would have said, I'm done. I'm stopping right here.
Right.
I'll wait till you guys get back down.
Yeah. And I think it's key, right? I think that there's people in our circle that we know have more in them.
Yes.
We know that there's a calling, there's an anointing, there's a giftedness. And many times we're okay with them just staying where they're at and saying, okay, well, that's you, that's not me. And I think what you showed me was, no, man, if we're here, if we started together, we're going to finish together.
Right.
And I'll take as long as I need to make sure that you cross the finish line.
And so, like you said, appropriately pulling out the best of people. Not being willing to let them settle for what they think is the sort of the limit of their abilities, but actually saying, no, there's more in you. And I'm going to force you to, in many ways, get into your uncomfort zone.
Yeah.
I like this idea in so many ways, but maybe help us then think about like, how can you do that as a leader unless you know the people deeply that you're leading?
Well, you just made your point.
Right. Yeah. But maybe expound on it some, because I don't know, right? As the position that I'm in, like, yeah, I've got some students that I lead and I get to call things out on them, but I'm not a high level kind of leader in that way. Like, what are some ways in which leaders can think about like knowing their people, and how do you do that as you kind of grow and you have even more people? Yeah.
Well, I mean, knowing your people requires that you get to know your people. I mean, truly, like that is not rocket science, and it doesn't. You don't wait till, again, you get to the top of the organization to now become a person who has empathy or a leader who cares about the people that have been entrusted to you.
Yeah.
And this is the requirement of every single level in the organization is, like there's certain people who are in your slipstream.
Yeah.
And my job, whoever's in my slipstream, is to actually bring the best out of them. Yeah. And that's actually the way you get promoted. I mean, the way you do that role. But so many of us today, especially, we're thinking, well, I'll wait till I get to whatever feels like it's important.
Yeah.
The title, whatever title is important, that I'll wait till then until I start to really be a people person and care about people and release them. And no, this starts, it starts when you're the intern.
Yeah.
You got other interns you can fully release and get to know them. And this is why EQ, guys, men and women, I say guys, men and women listening, EQ is equally important. In fact, it might be more important today in leadership compared to not just IQ, but actually all the other pieces. I mean, the emotional intelligence you have as a leader, empathy, caring, knowing people who you're leading, actually believing the best in them, being able to have conversations with them, pulling out the things in them that they don't even see. This is all part of that new reality, because the more digital and the more robotic we become, the more we need like actual people skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, to kind of throw it into this like kind of like theological twist here, I think that's really important, especially as we look at the life of Jesus, because oftentimes we can read the words of Jesus and we don't actually assume his emotional intelligence, because we flatten the story out. We're going to go, oh, Jesus looks at Peter and says, "Get behind me, Satan." Like, okay, he does that, but we don't actually think about the space that it took to create that moment for Jesus to be able to say that to Peter, and to have Peter go, "Well, Jesus knows me." Right? Where I think sometimes we hear that when someone might say it to us and like, "Hey, you're doing something dumb." A leader comes to us and like, "Hey, you're leading bad, or you're not doing what you should be doing." But there is not that emotional intelligence, healthiness between the two. And all of a sudden we go, "Well, who are you to say that to me?"
And this goes,
relational change.
Yeah, this goes back to, this all goes again back to self-awareness. As a Enneagram 3, hello.
Yep.
My tendency is not to get to know people.
Yeah.
My tendency is to see people as a cog in the wheel of process that will push me to the top of the food chain.
Oh, very much.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to win. You're now competition if I'm not careful.
Right.
You're now in my way compared to, no, part of my job is to believe the best in people and actually speak into them and build them up. But if I'm wired a certain way, I have to know that in order for not only me to be more intentional about it, but for also for people around me to call me out when I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Like this is why it's so important for all of us to know the way we're wired, is then people on your team actually then have permission to speak truth into you.
Yeah.
Way more than they could before. As soon as everybody knows, oh, Brad, that's why you look at me that way at certain points. And I thought you were just mean. I thought you were just mad at me. I thought you were just frustrated. I thought I said something wrong. No, it's just the way I'm wired.
Yeah. Yeah. For everyone who's listening, I'll throw in some like show notes on MBTI and Enneagram. If you don't know what it is, go take a look. It's going to be, it's
nobody has permission anymore to say, oh, well, I don't know where to start. There's so many resources that allow you not just spiritual assessments, but also now what we would consider to be, I guess, more mental or cognitive, or you guys are the academics.
Yeah, it's the recognizing ourselves as whole selves, our bodies and our souls as integrated things, not, oh, there's my spiritual self and then there's my physical self that's just there. But no, it's all
what
right.
I do compared to who I am.
Which I love what you said, because especially as an ENTJ, right? So talking about that MBTI, I learned something about myself as it related to my own kind of being with other people and emotionally intelligence, is that I learned that as I got tired, simple statements would come off as what I felt like someone was attacking me.
Right.
Someone could just be like, oh, that's an interesting shirt. And I thought that I had like dressed like the worst human being of all time.
Right.
But really it's just because I was tired and I only got 5 hours the night before. Otherwise, if I would have slept 8 hours and woken up and had a cup of coffee and felt good, I would have been like, oh yeah, it is an interesting shirt, isn't it? You know, and I think that's kind of part of what you're saying there with that being self-aware, even in terms of like our personality types or being an achiever. Cause I have the same thing, right? I'm very often can just look at people and go, oh, that person can help me do this.
Right.
I don't look at that person and go, oh, that person's a great person and they're killing it at what they do. And how can I help them do what they're doing?
Yeah.
I go, oh, they can help me get this thing done.
And personality tests also are not an excuse. So you can't stay where you are. You always you need to know where you are and then get better. So I can't say, well, I'm an Enneagram 3, I'm an ENTJ, so that's just the way I lead. Get used to it.
Yeah.
I'm a jerk most of the time, so that's the way it rolls around here. No, that's
You're not a jerk. You're not a jerk.
But that's short-sighted for me to say, oh, that's just the way I'm wired.
Right.
Compared to, I know how I'm wired, and now I'm going to become more like Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue to improve and get better and be more healthy and whole, which allows for me to be the best expression of the leader I can be.
Right.
Not, well, I'm just going to stay here because now I know the way I'm wired. And so you guys just have to put up with it.
Right. And I think it's easy to do that, especially as a 3. For me, as an achiever, it's so easy for me to just go, well, that's just who I am. You just have to get used to it. I'm just going to kind of steamroll moments, and I'm just going to steamroll what I need to do to get the thing done.
Think of the coaches. Think of the coaches in college athletics who are navigating a new form of student athlete and going, hey, if y'all don't like it, I've been coaching this way for 30 years. So if you don't like it, go play somewhere else. You know what's happening?
Transfer portal.
Exactly. And all these coaches are getting frustrated and mad. And I mean, I get it. This is short-term mindset we're now living in and transfer free agent mentality. But that's also like, you have to adjust as a leader at all different seasons in your career. And you can't just say, well, I've always led this way, that I was led this way, so therefore I'm going to lead you this way.
Yeah.
It's not good enough anymore.
And so that leads to excellence, right?
Yeah.
One of the things you said in your book in the later chapters, probably about page 135.
Man, you're so specific with your quotes.
It's for people to follow along, you know?
You said excellence.
That's right. Go buy the book and look it up in the book. Yeah.
I'll give you a discount code. No,
there we go.
I don't know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Now they're going to be looking for in the show notes where Ben said it was here.
That's right.
Excellence is about consistency. It is a mindset and a standard. And so as a young leader or a growing leader or a new leader that many of our listeners are, how do I practically develop excellence in my life, in my organization, the people I lead? How do I develop it? And then how do I maintain it?
That's a great question. I would say developing it starts with, don't rely on the organization that you're part of to actually set your standard. Now, it doesn't mean that your organization is a bad organization or that they're toxic or unhealthy or don't have standards, but you should never settle for whatever authority you're under. So I would always say, burn the handbook. Like whatever the handbook is that you got in whatever organization you're part of, whether it's a church or a company or a university, there's something somewhere that's collecting dust that told you, like, here's the requirements. Burn that, because the posture should be, I don't need a handbook to set my standard. And that means that it's always going to be higher. Your standard is always going to be higher. So take any area, take dress code, take time you're supposed to show up, take the job description, take the work you're required to do, take the responsibility that you now have, sort of been put on your shoulders. Your standard should always be more than that. And it also is that you're 1% improvement daily. Like that's doable. Wow. I can actually do 1% improvement daily.
Yeah.
And you're striving for perfection. And I use striving in a very in quotes, because a lot of people use the word striving nowadays it's starting to get a negative perception.
Yeah.
But the mindset is, I know I'm not going to hit perfection, but I want to try to pursue that. And again, so if you have certain areas, that you have now written down on your, yellow pad, hey, I want to learn in this area. I want to improve my financial skills. I want to get better at communicating. Whatever it is for you in this season, write those down and then say, how do I get better? It's not rocket science again to have this mindset.
Right.
But most of us, if we're honest, we settle for whoever is in charge of us.
Yeah.
And that's, again, if you're working in a great organization that has really high standards, those might line up. But most of us, we start to settle. It's what Seth Godin calls the dip. We get into whatever that dip is, and then we start to just basically try to hide based on our standards. So don't get in trouble. Don't do too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't do too less, because then you're going to get called in to the principal's office or whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
And my response to that is, that's the wrong conversation. You should be so much more than that, where that's not even part of your mindset.
So
100%. So
how do we find, because that so much sounds like a kind of like a cultural reality, right? Like the culture that's being set by the people, almost kind of like if it's burn the handbook, it's not the culture set maybe by the organization, but by the people. But we have to find ways to help the people. Maybe if I'm hearing you right, help the people become healthy so that that's the culture that they create for themselves.
Yes. And the thing about teams is, when I'm on a team that I love being a part of, when I'm part of an organization, but not just an organization, a team, like an actual team that I interact with, when we have standards individually that are pushing each of us to raise our standard, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's when it gets fun.
Yeah.
And all the eagles, they flock to that kind of environment. All the buzzards, as this is a Dave Ramsey, he talks about eagles and buzzards. All the buzzards don't like that, because now they look, what they'd say to those other eagles? They say, hey, would you quit working so hard? Because now you're making me look bad.
Yeah.
Compared to, would you continue to work hard because you're pushing me? You're actually raising my standard.
Yeah.
I want to be in that kind of environment.
Right. Why are you so excellent in what you do? I just want to be mediocre. Right. I want to stay on the mediocre bus.
And this is the reality of a lot of people, if they're honest. And for some reason, at some point, they moved into that dip. They moved into the default of average or mediocre. And they never set out and said, hey, by the time I'm 37, man, I want to be a middle manager and basically just exist and survive and don't rock the boat. But this is true in lots of categories of industry.
Yeah.
And if that's you and you've settled, then you've got to be the one who starts to raise the standard again.
I as a story for me, I found that to be very true in a space where when I first started kind of doing music in my late teens, I was terrible. And I knew it was terrible, but I wanted to do it. So what I did was I found a way into being with a team of people, like being on a band, that they were all phenomenal compared to me. I was absolutely the worst person. If anything, I was the weakest link, bringing them down.
Yeah.
But I found that being with them as phenomenal musicians that spent time practicing, that spent time learning theory, that spent time trying to understand what they did, it naturally made me do that same thing.
You got it.
Just by being around them, to the point where I would even count my mistakes. I'd go, all right, we played this set list. I made this many mistakes. I knew exactly where the mistakes were, and here's how I'm going to fix them next time. And naturally, I never even set out to do that. I was just like, if I'm going to be playing with them, I have to play at their standard.
This is why if you're the leader and you're the smartest person in the room, you need to get a different room.
Wow. Yeah.
But most of us, we create environments where we are the smartest as for the leader because that makes us feel better, because it allows us to create a hierarchical environment that is naturally easy to tell people what to do, because, but compared to, I want to be a leader who is surrounded by people who I look at and go, I don't belong in this room.
Yeah.
But I'm in charge. So therefore my job is to now curate and conduct.
Yeah.
The conductor as the leader today is much more of a better picture, which the conductor has a tuba player and a flute player and a saxophone and a drummer who would crush them.
Right.
If they had to, sort of compare their skills.
Yeah.
That's a way better picture of a leader today compared to, the best trombone player surrounded by C-level trombone players.
Yeah. Or even a trombone player with an orchestra who only knows how to direct the trombone players. You got it. And not the violins, or I don't even, I'm messing up the metaphor.
No, that's great. I mean, that's the picture though of a leader. I think, again, today this has always been true, but more today, it's the coach, the conductor, the curator, the aggregator. That's a picture of a leader today.
Yeah. Not
a boss, not a industrial revolution driven. We're on the factory floor and your job is to make a gadget.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that gadget well, then we're going to remove you from the factory floor.
This kind of reminds me, or maybe you can speak to this. How do we think about, the leaders that we know are leaders that have the people around them that are just the yes people, right? Like I brought in people underneath me who will just say yes,
right?
Versus the leader who comes and brings people into the room who are much better than them, right? What's the unhealthy disconnect there? Why do we want those yes people? I think?
Oh, well, because it makes us feel good.
Yeah.
And most of us, we create that environment without knowing it.
Yeah.
Because we now will naturally start to elevate people who tell us what we want to hear, not what we need to hear.
Yeah.
This happens in every organization. So part of my job as a leader then is to find people and actually promote people who appropriately are truth tellers.
Yeah.
And appropriately will speak back into me. And not the brown noser, because we know what that looks like. Oh, yeah. Not the overachieving, like type A who just wants my job and they're going to do everything in their power to sort of take me out of the game.
Yeah.
But the appropriately leading up type of leader who says, I want to help you get better. And I'm going to tell you the truth. And we are starving for those kind of people.
Yeah.
But we naturally don't allow them most of the time to sit at the table. We push them away without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that leads me to this question for our listeners. We have listeners that are listening to us right now and saying, okay, I lead an organization with 500 people. I lead an organization with thousands of people. I'm getting better at my EQ. You're asking me to know the individuals. And so how can I, coming in as a new leader to an organization that's already established or that has transitioned from one generation to another, how can I get to know the people? Like for me, it's like, man, 500 people, that's a lot of people in the organization, or 200 people, or 1,500, or tens of thousands. Like, how do I get to know everybody? Or do I need to get to know everybody?
You can't. It's not.
So how do you help that individual that right
possible.
now is saying, Brad, what you're saying is too tall of a task.
Yeah.
Bite size here.
Figure out what the circle is that you can actually get to know, and then be really intentional within that circle. So, but it doesn't mean that you're not reaching out and trying to connect with people in the 500 or the thousands or the 10,000s. I mean, it's Andy Stanley's thing of do for one what you wish you could do for many. And that actually is a good theory, because what happens in the early days when it's 5 of us sitting around the table, and then it becomes 20, and then it becomes 100, and everybody starts to say, remember when we actually were buddies and pals and we went on vacation together, and that's not true anymore. There's only a certain level to which you can deliver yourself in contextual friendship or relationship with other people. So figure out what that circle is for you and then be really intentional about that circle. And then, but that's cultural. So now that starts to pass down and that starts to become the fabric of the organization.
Yeah.
But here's what it also doesn't mean, because every one of those 500 people or 1,000 people, you know what they expect from you as the leader? Access.
Yeah.
Way more than ever. Way more than ever. And this is not just true for people who you pay. It's true for movements. It's true for organizations that have thousands of customers. When I call Delta today as a Diamond Medallion member, I expect to talk to somebody who's really high up the food chain.
Yeah.
And I don't dislike the customer service person who is just answering the call in some call center, but my expectation is that I have access to Ed Bastian.
Yeah.
Now, do I know Ed? No, but that's my expectation today, because digital has changed the conversation. If I want to reach out to Shaquille O'Neal, I just like DM him on Twitter. Now, does that mean we're buddies? No, but that's the expectation.
Right.
So we have to, it requires leaders to have more availability. So if you're hiding behind like 17 layers of assistants and passcodes, and it's harder to get into your office leader than it is to, get into like the Federal Reserve Bank, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because people want to feel like they have a sense of, oh, I'm friends with you, even though I don't ever talk to you.
Right.
And pastors, like if you're a pastor and you're leading, a church of, let's say it's 2,000. Well, Brad, I can't talk to everybody. No, but you can come out after your sermon and sit or stand down in the front and high five 10 people. Because you know what happens when you high five 10 people? That's creating an environment that says, oh, our pastor is accessible.
Right.
If I wanted to, I could go talk to him or her. That's perceived access. In some ways equally as important. And it doesn't mean that you stand back and talk to 2,000 people, but it does mean that you're showing that sense that I'm available.
I want to jump back real quick, because there's something that you said that I want to maybe just get your thoughts on. Is that when we were talking about like the having yes people underneath you, and then actually how to you speak truth appropriately, and have those people in the room who do speak truth appropriately, especially for me as someone who is a 3 and an ENTJ, which is a dangerous combination there, to also kind of add being a contrarian and always kind of wanting to be a little bit skeptical about things.
Yeah.
How do you do that appropriately? And how do leaders actually see the people who are doing it appropriately and go, they're actually doing it well, even if it's something I disagree with?
Well, let's talk about when have you done that inappropriately?
Oh, a lot.
Well, let's talk about like one of the examples.
Oh man, off the top of my head, I don't know if I've got like a specific example. I just know me, like I know it, my natural inclination is to kind of look at something and go, this is all wrong.
Yep.
Everything needs to change.
Yep.
We're doing it terrible. Here's exactly how I would do it if it was me.
So if I'm leading you, then first of all, I need to know that that's the way you're naturally wired.
Yeah.
Your view and mindset and perception of reality is always going to lean that way.
Yeah.
But I want you to speak that truth into the context of the conversation. Now, it's different when you're giving me personal feedback compared to giving organizational feedback.
Yeah.
Those are different. If I'm in a staff meeting or I'm in the executive team meeting and you throw me under the bus personally, now we're going to fight.
Yeah.
Not fist fight, but we're
right.
you've now created an environment. Yes. Compared to do that with me privately now. You come to me and say, hey, can I give you a few things? Can I give you a few areas of feedback that I've noticed recently that I think will help you lead better?
Yeah.
When you say that to a leader, the average leader, if they're average or above average in their leadership, they're going to go, yes, please. Thank you finally for somebody showing up and actually helping me lead better compared to just blowing smoke up my skirt or jeans or, so it all depends on the context. But I need to pull that out of you.
Yeah.
If I'm the leader. And again, the more I see it, the more I want to encourage it. It's just like conflict on a team.
Yeah.
Most people avoid it like the plague. In fact, just the opposite. Like I want people to be in healthy conflict as part of a team because tension actually makes things healthy and it helps things grow. But it has to be based on trust.
Right.
Do we trust each other? Do we truly, at the end of the day, like believe the best in each other and we're all for the vision?
Yeah.
So conflict based on trust creates great exchange of ideas, which leads to the best idea. Conflict based on distrust is what government looks like in its worst form, which is I'm going to take you out.
Right.
It's all transactional. My job is it's scarcity mindset. If I remove you from the equation, that means I win.
Yeah.
Like that's conflict based on distrust. But healthy organizations, I mean, if you walk into cultures and teams that we would all sort of say are the best in the world, you'll notice these kind of things happening. You'll notice that you walk in and go, wow, like in some ways I feel like those people don't even like each other.
Yeah.
No, they are willing to fight for the idea because they know that we're all in this for the best idea wins, because it's a trust culture.
Yeah. Well, which I love, because I think so many people that I know are afraid to speak up because they're afraid to speak up and say, I think there's something wrong here, because they feel as if, if I speak up, I'm gone. I'm done for. This is over. And then that creates just a negative environment for people who can't actually speak that out and go, hey, what's going on with this? Or, hey, how do we handle this?
And you know where you speak it out? You speak it out after the meeting to each other in the gossip center.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
where no one grows and no one learns,
and that's all.
And it's not better for the government. For the government, it's not better for the organization.
but it's
and
all,
the government too. We're talking politics today.
That's all in the shadows where that's all in the places where it doesn't help. That's just sideways energy.
Yeah.
Compared to actually say the thing, say the thing that you're telling somebody else. Say that to the person you actually needed to say it to.
Yeah.
Or the leader that you needed to say it to. But you have to be appropriate. It's appropriate, helpful feedback loops. And I mean, all of this, again, it goes back to trust. And I mean, Pat Lencioni's book, The Advantage, is one of the best books on this particular topic that I've read to date.
Yeah.
And he wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He's written a bunch of great books on organizational culture. But that book, The Advantage, there's so much in there around this particular topic. That would be one book I'd recommend everybody picking up.
Besides H3 Leader.
Well,
that's right. And pick that one up too.
Yeah. I actually, unfortunately, I have to go to class. I want to keep just talking.
What class are you going to?
Christian Thought and Practice.
Okay.
Yeah. Sophomore level introduction theology class.
Now, we didn't talk any theology here, or did we talk all theology? That's the question.
Ooh.
Huh?
We'll leave that for the next session.
Come on.
But before we go, how can our listeners connect with you? Or, I know you've got a couple books, so maybe kind of throw those out there.
All the normal outlets, just, go buy The Cattle Seeder or H3 Leadership. Those are the books.
Yeah.
BradLomenick.com. All the social media follows are just first and last name. But I'm a terrible follow these days because I don't really post much. I'm listening.
I'm with you. I'm
listening way
He's
more
in the
than,
shadows like Darkwing Duck.
I'm listening way more than talking.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for jumping in the room with us and having a conversation. This is a great conversation. I loved it. I loved it.
Hopefully there was one thing in there that was helpful for you as a leader.
1%.
Just one. No, just 1 thing.
Yeah.
Take one thing away. What's your one thing? 1%?
1% better.
Yeah.
Definitely 1% better. I can get 1 second faster on the bike. I can run a minute faster.
Doable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
Well, I don't know about a minute faster, but maybe a couple seconds.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Formula One nerd.
Oh, me too.
Oh, are you
More recently,
really?
have you watched the Netflix documentary,
I have.
Drive to Survive?
We have a lot to talk about there.
Brad recommends on the old Drive to Survive Netflix documentary of Formula One.
Mercedes, they just won their 6th championship where they've got the constructors, which means like the car itself, the team won their championship, and a driver is going to win the championship.
Yes,
and that's the
Hamilton.
6th time in a row. Oh, don't let Valtteri, there's a chance. There's a small chance.
Listen, Hamilton's the man.
But their CEO was just talking about, he was asked, how have you done it? How have you gotten 6th in a row? And he literally just said incremental increase.
That's
just
it.
Everything, every little area. If you just have a little incremental increase, which I know is the same with the national team for England here when it comes to their bicyclist or cyclist team, right? Just incremental increases make the world of difference.
How do we take the pit stop from 2.6 seconds to 2.58 seconds?
Which is insane. That is that quick already, and they're asking for a quicker.
That's doable. I can drop 0.02 seconds off my pit stop time, but that's the difference between many times winning and losing.
Yeah.
1. Yep.
Oh gosh, I just want to talk about Formula
1
One now.
second,
and we
1 degree
definitely
better.
can.
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks again, Brad, so
And
much
they have
for
more
being
money.
here.
Mercedes has a lot
that's
more money than the
true.
rest of them, too.
That does really help. Yeah. But Ferrari's got a lot of money, and
That's true.
They're not doing it. They are, but they're not. Thanks again so much for being
welcome.
with us. Loved it. Hopefully, we'll chat soon.